Hello everyone. Welcome to Homemaking Radio. I hope you get a lot done while you listen today. I hope I have some things that are worthwhile for you. It won't all be on housekeeping or homemaking, but some thoughts that many women at home have to deal with, as I have observed or had conversations with other homemakers, that might benefit you. Because homemaking is a career that you do by yourself. It's not with a group. You're not going to get awards. You're not going to get an itemized analysis of your work. You analyze it yourself. You see your own mistakes. You work by yourself, and you have to be self-motivated. And it can be quite a challenge. And so it's interesting to hear what happens to other women and what they've observed and what they're saying, and even family situations. And you'll think, oh, yeah, that happened to me too. I'm not a failure. It's part of the territory. So ladies, today I'm Mrs. Sherman, and not pretending to be anything else. I have been doing some stealth sipping and acting like I'm doing something terribly clever. And I will send you some more pictures. The idea was that I wanted to stealth camp, but I wasn't allowed because I'm so vital. And so I decided to stealth sip instead, and I have boxes and boxes of very interesting tea blends, and wanted to try just a sip of each one without committing myself to a whole cup, because I wanted to be fair to the tea, and fair and not too prejudiced. My favorite, all-time favorite, of course, is Yorkshire Gold, plain, nothing in it, just this beautiful golden drink that I adore. And so I had to break free from that and just get a sip every day of something else. And today, of course, as in other days when I am here, and by the way, thank you all for coming to hear this lesson today, and to let me maybe even have a section in here on homeschooling. I start out with getting yourself prepared. I call it prep, and it involves more than just taking your bath and fixing your clothing and getting a good start to the day, but it's also your poses and stretches and your prayers and making your list. This is all part of the little prep capsule before you delve into something, if you can possibly do that. Now I realize a lot of you have other demands on your time, children around and grandchildren around, and might not be able to do this. But what I've always said is get as close to the ideal as you can. So while you might not be able to follow all this completely, at least get the principles of it in your mind, so that you know you're headed for a goal. You're striving towards something, and you might not accomplish it, but you're getting there. You're at least doing it. You know, the pursuit of happiness, of course, is in the pursuit. It's not in the arrival at the end of the rainbow gold happiness. It's the pursuit of it. It's the fun of it. It's the enjoyment of it. It's the accomplishment. And you know, I had a book years ago, a blank book, and it had some graph paper in it, and I would do floor plans for myself of my future home. Maybe I was very young, and I would draw these things, and then someone said, well, what if someone were to just build that particular plan? And I was almost crestfallen, because the enjoyment of continuing to perfect these plans would absorb me so much. And if someone had actually built it, I might have been a little bit, okay, where do I go now? So when you're pursuing something, remember, even though you might not reach it, we all hope to reach our goals, yes. Even though you might not reach it, the enjoyment is, and the fulfillment is in pursuing it. So today I have so much to tell you. I have been in such a house upheaval. It's that way, isn't it, when you have an older home? And there was a window that was over 60 years old. It had grown very thin. It had the aluminum frame around it. In fact, when my grandsons took it out, it just crumpled and bent, and of course the glass, it broke right away. It had grown so thin, and it was real probably very cheap in the first place. And they put in a wonderful window, but oh my goodness, what noise they made. And they were wearing ear protectors, eye protectors, and headgear, and they weren't recognizable. And I stayed away, except to feed them. And of course I realized I could not feed them a delicate tea, so I had to feed them like a chuck wagon type of food, like men out on the trail. So I really enjoyed that. And so now I have a beautiful window. And as I was walking through the house afterwards, I thought of the many times I have gotten up and walked through the house, and there's some parts of the house I just feel kind of like uneasy in, not just uneasy, but just like, I don't like that corner over there. I don't like, it doesn't feel very cheerful over here. And there was one area that I enjoyed walking, and it was like the foyer area. It was well lit, beautiful door. The light came onto the beautiful floor, and it just gave me such inspiration and peace. But there was another area that when I walked past it, I tended to just want to get past it and not spend any time in there. As a matter of fact, I don't even stealth sip in there, and that was the dining area. I just didn't want to go there, and I have such a large entourage of descendants that there's not enough room around one table for all of them anyway, so there were other tables in the house that I could go to in other locations, and so I'm not worried that no one wanted to sit in there. But once that window got in there, it just changed everything, because it's a beautiful insulated window with a vinyl tract on it, and it opens and closes quite easily. And they say, and you who are vital have heard this or read this back in the day, the eyes are the window of the soul. You could often tell just how weary someone was by their eyes. You could tell how happy they were by their eyes. You could also tell how hardened they were, how jaded they were. You could tell, and today, people are real good about seeing if eyes can tell if someone is sick or lacking a certain nutrient in their diet, or if they're on some kind of substance. They can tell often by the eyes. And so I thought, well, the eyes are the window of the soul. The windows are the soul of the house. Because my daughter had a scrapbook years ago, back before they were real scrapbooks. We would just take old paper and take stuff out of magazines, advertisements, and things we liked, and just glue them in with awful glue. But she had this book she had made, and it had windows in it, and it was Anderson windows, and all these famous companies that produced wonderful windows. And there would be a little comment here and there on the page where she had said, now that's what I call a window. And so this beautiful window is there, and that's what I call a window. And it has created a different atmosphere in the house. And I had not thought years ago whether it matters or not. What do windows matter? And when we start learning about the atmosphere they produce in the home, and how they filter the light, how they bring in the light or the darkness, and how what effect it can have on you, homemakers need to be very aware of their house environment and their house atmosphere. And so I think it's really good to look around and feel what you need in a house, what would make it better. I lived in a very old house one time out on a farm in Texas, and I could tell that the man who built it and his wife, he and his wife who built it back in the day, they were careful. I noticed, how the light would come in the evening over one of your shoulders if you had sat there and you had needlework to do or a book to read. And I thought, these people probably knew a lot more about how they were going to spend their time in that house, so that every nook and cranny mattered, every shadow, every season. These rooms were amazing to me, and it was just a little southern colonial house, one story, but we absolutely learned so much about that house. It had the old light switch plates, ornate, and that had keys. The big key to every room had one of those keys, every room, every door, and which I thought was just absolutely wonderful. We haven't been able to replicate it here, but I have bought some of the little cases you put over your light plugs and switches, so to give it some kind of more of an atmosphere of that. This one is not as old as that one was, so I thought that was quite an experience. And of course, after they left, that was the big aftermath of the storm, and so many things I put in another room just to get it out of the way. And then of course they had visitors while they were here, and so I had to get things cleaned up and put out of the way, and then I had to clean that up afterwards. So it's been a while since I've been here. Did you think I wasn't coming back? So ladies, let me see. What am I doing? Well, I have quite a bit to talk to you about. So I hope that you'll go now and do something. Wait a minute, I've got something to show you, and it's not a teacup. We had, as you know, some of my descendants live way over across a very dangerous pass in Oregon. We originally came here from Texas, but they lived over across on this pass, and they only visit when that pass is safe. And you can go, they have cameras on that pass now, so you can go and actually look online at the level of the snow or the temperature or the rain to see if you want to drive it. And then sometimes they're actually closed, so you can't drive it. So we worked up a scheme where it was very short notice, so we didn't have time to really do very much, where we would celebrate Thanksgiving and Christmas together, because they might not be able to come back until May, what is that, 6 months? And so we wanted to do something for each other. And so what we did was, with Thanksgiving, because of the amount of people there, I think there were 9, and I'm sure some of you have had more, but I decided I did not want to do any heavy lifting. And so what I did is I made a tea time Thanksgiving with Tea Time magazine. The current Tea Time magazine had some ideas for that. So we had turkey on a kind of a crust, pie crust with a filling in it of a lot of tasty herbs and spices and things like that, and little hors d'oeuvres, little bites of everything. And then everything else that was a traditional part, like your cranberry sauce, was made into something that you could eat with your fingers. And everything like the dressing, the turkey, the potatoes were all made into little things, little hors d'oeuvres. And so, it was so much easier because I could start real early, put them in the freezer, get them back out, and also there wasn't so much stress, trying to clean up the pots and pans and big roasting pans and stuff. None of that. In fact, I used my little Oster toaster oven that bakes and broils and does other things. I just used that in there, and I managed to make a huge family very happy. They really enjoyed it, and we had hot apple cider with cinnamon and in little glass cups, and that was all, and it was actually so much better. So the next year we'll be doing that again. And so we decided what we would do, and we got the idea from one of the things that I had read to you, and I've forgotten what the name of the site was. Was it a Regency site where they sold a package, a box once in a while, and it had all these Regency style things in there as gifts, and it was like a subscription, something like that. And I thought we could do that with our Yorkshire tea boxes. Now, I like Yorkshire Gold better than Yorkshire tea, and it has, I love the scenery on it. I love the picture on there. And so when my descendants are on their way, getting ready to go home, I often pack these full of a lunch for them, and I put a little quartered sandwich in here. I'll put some Laughing Cow cheese with some crackers, and I'll put homemade shortbread and maybe a little mandarin orange, whatever will fit in here. And even though they're now some of them are in their 20s, they have an absolute fit if I don't come back in the house and say, did you forget to give me the tea box? Because they want a snack on the way home. And the youngest one, I'm not going to forget them. The little ones that are age 5 and 6 and 7 and 8 and that sort of thing. But anyway, that's what I've been using with the empty boxes. And sometimes I have other types of tea, like wild berry zinger or something. And the box is what counts. And so we decided for Christmas, because this might be the last time we'd see each other for 6 months, because we just really don't want them to be coming over that pass in the winter. Oh, there's another pretty picture on the side of this Yorkshire Gold tea box. Now remember, if you want a good tea, it's Yorkshire Gold, not Yorkshire. And whatever you could fit into this box. So we're just one box per person. So in other words, if they're to give a box to me, then each one of them could put something in this box to fill it up. And she said, I think we went against the rules because there's some stuff, we couldn't close it, stuff spilling out. It reminded me of the trash collection out here. You put your trash bags in this big bin, and then the garbage truck comes once a week and picks it all up. And sometimes the lid is not quite closed because we had something extra from the church dinner or something, and just the lid wouldn't quite close, and the bags are showing. So they cheated with this, but they're always quite gracious to us. They don't charge us extra if our lid doesn't quite close. They won't charge us for a whole bin if there's just one extra bag in there. But anyway, I wanted to show you what they put in here, and it wasn't just one person. But I wish I had I wish I'd done a picture of what I gave them, because they each got a tea box, and it was full of very interesting things from the youngest to the oldest that I was able to do. So let's start with this and see what happened. Well, first she lined it with a real pretty piece of tissue paper, and then let's see. Oh my! So I know who did this. This was Miss Lillian. She's taking an watercolor art course from Artworthy Life, and I've had that on here before and told you about it. So they're called, she calls them art trade cards, but I like them to use them for bookmarks. As a matter of fact, if you get the big idea you want to write to me and send me something, please include a bookmark, because what my problem is these will go in a book and I won't take them out, because I don't want to flip through books and try to find out what I was finding interesting or what I needed in that book, even cookbooks. And so I always need them, and I can never find them because they're already in a book somewhere. So when I die, they'll go through those books and find out what page I was reading. Anyway, so now that was from Miss Lillian. She's 15. And that's why I like reading that book by Mrs. Prentice, because the girl that's the diary is 15, going on 16. I just thought it was interesting. And so now, here is a book written by, I believe he's 9 now, or maybe he's 10. As you can see, there's a little car on there, and it's called it says Top Secret on the back. And someone has, and he's so smart, he got on, these kids know more than I do about using the printer and the web and everything. When they come, I try to get them to do things. And the younger the child, the 8-year-old is smarter than anybody, knows how to do it. He made me a password book. Now, isn't that clever? So let's see how he did it. See, each page says website, password. Everybody needs that. So, and he did it with, looks like his mother's papers, scrapbook papers. Let's see what else is in here. Goodness sake. Let's see what this is. I know what this is. This is a paint can lid remover. Has a little hook there. To take the paint can lid off, because I have a box and a little can of paint, and I'll go around and paint maybe a windowsill or something on the wall that is discolored or something, and then put it away, and I can't get the lid back off. But I have found a secret to that. Before you put your paint away, you take your brush and you slick some paint around the edges of the opening, and then put the lid on, rather than smashing the lid down on the dry edges. And then it will lift off. It will all seal together, and it will lift off very easily. So let's see what else. This is cute. Look at this little vellum bag. That was from somebody else. Let me see what was in there. What did she do? I don't know where she got these. I don't know where she got these. This is called Dill Dip Mix, and it looks like she took her own herbs and made a little mix for me. And then this one is called Italian Seasoning. So it looks like she made the Italian seasoning for me, and that was from one of the other descendants. And there were a few other things in here, but the idea was, if you can fit it in this box, that's what we'll exchange, because I'm getting of such a vital age that I told them, do not bring me anything that takes up too much space anymore. And so, because I've done that myself. And, oh, by the way, I'm sitting in my sewing room, which is also got a day bed back here that my daughter grew up on this day, sleeping on this day bed, and I've just got the camera angled away from the mess in here, sewing mess. And so, if you've got something you need to do, okay, kids, you can go now and work and listen. And I noticed on my stats, I don't read them very much, but that people tend to spend 20 minutes at the least on the average and then leave the site. But I think what they're not observing is they come back and they'll pause and then they'll finish the film. And I don't feel like getting all set up here and testing out my equipment and getting dressed and coming here and just talking for 5 minutes. So you don't have to listen to an hour. You can stop it at any time and come back to it another time. So I've been doing something else. I have been researching the Jane Austen era in a way, because it's there's some things that I found quite interesting. And the Regency era was the era of right after King George III, the one that lost the colonies. He was pronounced incapable of ruling by, I don't know if it was the English Parliament or what, but his son was put temporarily in his place, and the son was called the Regent, and so it was called the Regency era, and he brought the farming into kind of a high-end respectability type of thing. So to marry a farmer was considered quite good, and that the English gardens and the idea of producing your own food was considered quite regal and royal. And you can read more about him online as part of your assignment if you want to. We've got to be careful and not stereotype certain eras without knowing more about them. I know someone sent me an article once about the Victorian era, and there was a drawing in this article of a fireplace, and in the fireplace was a great big bouquet of flowers. Well, they said, how ignorant were these people that they would put a bouquet of flowers in a hearth, in a fireplace. But we've learned a lot more about fireplaces, and of course they wouldn't have been used much in the summer, so it would make sense to put something there to keep that black hole from showing, something pretty there. But we also learned that there were different kinds of fireplaces and what it was all used for. So we've got to be careful of making judgments based on our own ignorance. So I have been reading, I have not been reading this, but I have been listening to, there are some people who live today who like to write of the Regency era, of the Jane Austen style stories. So I wanted to tell you about one that I have been listening to. And when you see audiobooks on YouTube and you see who the author is, and it says author of Sweet Romance. Sweet Romance is a label that they're using to indicate that the book is clean and innocent and doesn't have explicit things in it that would be offensive. So this author writes Sweet Romance, and her name is Sally Britton. Now, we don't know if that's her real name, but she, I don't know if she narrates herself, but I thought, well, I'm going to listen to this while I work, because I would never listen to myself. I would find all the mistakes, and then I'd be very discouraged. So the one I'm listening to now is called Letters for Phoebe. And it's on YouTube. And I've been taking notes throughout some of these by her that I've been listening to, and she's very good with her language. It sounds very Regency. And one of the things that was said that was a young man hesitated to send a letter to a young woman unless he had had permission from the family. Now that's true. See, that's why I'm glad that some of these writers that want to go to the Regency era are really sensible of the etiquette of the time. And it is a good idea because if you go to the father and mother first, they're thrilled to be part of it, and sometimes, and no mother or father likes anything sprung on them. They don't want to find out something and after the fact. So that was one of the things, good values, in some of these audiobooks. But they are actually books, I think, that someone is reading. So they're actually published books. So okay, so then the other one that I was listening to was called The Unsuitable Match. And in it, was talking about someone who had come back from war, quite damaged and quite wounded. And she described this young man, as this. And I've been taking notes of some of her sayings. They're quite good, actually. He was so scared from war that men so scared from war, talking about these men coming back, that the description of him was like this: men so scared from war that they hardly knew how to exist in a land of peace. Yeah, so shaken. And then in the previous book that I was reading, called Letters for Phoebe, it was about letters that she was getting from someone who was warning her about some of the people in her life that didn't have her best interest at heart, and to just warn her. And she got her first letter, and she looked at it and asked somebody in her family, who gave you this letter, because it has not been franked. Okay, so I am vital enough that I remember when a letter had to be franked, and it just meant it had the postmark put on it. And that was, franking. It was a franking machine, and you put the letter through it, and it was called franked. So some of you who don't know, I just homeschooled you. So, and it's important to know these things, because when it increases your enjoyment of some of these audiobooks, or indeed just the old Jane Austen books. So it also made me think of what a good thing it was to go to any authority. And I realized that over time, as a homemaker, and you might find this too, that if you look back, and I certainly did, discovered that every time there was any kind of an embroglio with another person, it was a result of them not minding their own business, or me not minding my own business. And so I decided that I would, and the reason I bring this up is it's in connection with this idea and belief that it was a good thing to go to the one in charge, or the one in authority. And often people would, in my era, go past the mother and the wife and go to someone else to get something they wanted done, whether it was to sell something to the family or what, and leave her out and just bypass her. And I remembered some of that, So I decided to look up, I said it was any kind of personal embroglio or upset often came from when someone else was not minding their business, or was getting someone involved in something that was not their business either. And I decided to look up the word business. And it, in Jesus' time, Jesus said, I must be about my Father's business. Well, a lot of people could read the New Testament and come to the conclusion when it said, let each one of you mind their own business. And it was from 1 Thessalonians 4:11. Everyone to be quiet and mind your own business. And so I looked up the word business as to what it meant in the Bible, what the word really was, and it meant work. Mind your own work. So if you're minding your own business at home, it doesn't mean you have to be in a business. It doesn't mean you have to be online earning money or in a business, but your work. So when it says being quiet and minding your own business, means minding your own work. So what kind of work do you have at home to do? And people have taken that word business to mean an enterprise where money is exchanged for labor. And it doesn't mean that. It means your work, what you're responsible for, what your duty is to do. And you could probably list a myriad of things in the home that must be done. Your list is probably as long as mine, and you probably get about 2 of those things done. I have come to the stage in my life where I expect to do 1 thing per day, just like it was on the old dish towels and aprons. Monday is work day, baking. Tuesday is wash day. Wednesday is whatever. Because otherwise I've got little remnants of everything left over to do if I don't concentrate on 1 thing. And so yesterday I got busy and got that kitchen cleaned up well enough that it could last a day without me doing any work in there. And so that today I could come and lecture you. And so remember, when you're listening to this, kids, just do whatever works best for your home, and don't listen to what I say as too seriously without checking out to see if it actually works for you or if it's sound in any way. And I'm just entertaining you while you work, and just consider it the rantings of an old woman. And so now I'm going to enjoy talking to you about some other things that I have been doing. So staying home is the same as minding your own business, meaning minding your own work. That's your own responsibility. And last time I spoke to you, I was suggesting that some of the hymns in the church songbooks should be saying stay and teach, because there were so many songs I noticed. It was go into the field and go here and go there and spread the word and so much of that. And I wondered why it didn't say stay and teach your loved ones or teach the ones around you, because so many young people get caught up in wanting to save the world and leave home where they're needed the most. And then I discovered that in the scripture, which they call the Great Commission, go into the world and preach the gospel to every creature, that when I looked up the meanings of the phrases and what the Greek words were, it actually meant as you go into the world. So as we go into the world, and so we're here in the world, we have to go out for essential business, we have to go out for errands, and we have, as we go about our homemaking and our housework, we are responsible to teach the gospel to others. But really, if you'll listen to that little poem I quoted you, you're writing a gospel, a chapter each day. Men read what you write, they listen to they hear what you say. And so as you go into the world, I don't want to add words that aren't there in English, but that is just the general connotation of it. And you can look that up yourself too. Now, I have been doing something different with exercise. I don't want to be jumping around too much. I don't want anything too vigorous. So I have discovered, and it all began when I wasn't feeling well one day and I got a terrible sinus. And I haven't had one of those in a long time. And I found poses, what are they called? Poses and breathing exercises for sinus. And they really helped. It almost went away immediately. So that is where I'm going now, as I'm learning certain stretches and poses that you hold that clear my sinus, clear my mind, and make my body feel fit so that I am fit for my own work, for my own business. And so I wanted to read something to you now that I've covered all of this. And if you haven't got, your house the way you want it, get busy and make your list as to the thing that is the most pressing first. And I always say it's got to be the sanitation areas of your house, where the water is, the kitchen, the laundry room, and the bathroom. Get those things sanitized, and then somehow it catapults you on to the next thing. And also your front room, your first room that people will see. And it also helps in the impression that you give yourself and your loved ones as they come into the front room by the front door. If that room can be more easily cleaned than any other room, I think. And if that can be taken care of, it gives everyone a sense of well-being and also gives you courage to go on to the rest of the house. So today I'm going to read from you. Remember I told you about Fascinating Girl and what a kerfluffle it created when it first came out. Indeed, I was probably 19 or 20 when I first read it, and had not ever read anything quite like it before. I grew up in the public school, and most of the stuff was kind of general, and with no character lessons at all, and horrible literature to read and analyze, and nothing that gave life any clear, deep purpose or meaning. And so when I came across this book and went to one of the classes, I was just almost couldn't understand it because it was so good. It was so basic and so good. And I wanted to read what she wrote. And this was back in the 60s when this new morality came across. And she wrote this, and I thought it was excellent. She says, the law of chastity was created for our well-being and happiness, and is especially essential to the happiness of a woman for a number of reasons. Now, I don't want to criticize or judge anyone that got caught up in that new morality back in the day, or even today. I don't want to do that. A lot of people get lured into it and don't know quite how they got there or what happened. But I'll just read this to you because you know what you can do? You can help the next generation, and you can help yourself. So, contrary to this law of God, there has come into existence a new morality which teaches an opposite doctrine. This new code teaches our youth that chastity is no longer important, that they can engage in free love with anyone, and that marriage is no longer required. Now, if you have little children and you're listening to this, you might want to be cautious about that. It's not real explicit, but it's you have to have a mature mind to understand it. It is strange that they think they can take a God-given law that has been tried and proven for thousands of years and toss it out without ill effects. One need only to look around to see the results of the new morality. Are these who engage in it people of worth? Are they the builders of the nation and the strength of society? Do they create homes that will inspire children to be better citizens and have higher goals? No, they are drifting downstream. They are not the lifters of society, but the leaners. When they speak, they have nothing to offer the youth that makes life richer or fuller. That's the reason a lot of us objected to the youth groups. They only offer a life of indulgences and frustrations. It is best, young girls, to listen to those who know the answers, those who know the way to true happiness and peace. There are several strikes against this new morality that each young woman should understand. In the first place, it does not lead to happiness. Whether we realize it or not, there are certain definite laws, she's talking about spiritual laws, in operation in this life which cannot be changed or altered. So, she said here, that it's destructive to the character, and even if people are not morally wrong. Hanging around with those kind of people can make you become more lax in your thinking. So she has a whole chapter on this and how it's related to their future and to marriage. And so I wanted you to know about that. That's The Fascinating Girl. Very hard girl. A very hard book to locate, to find. And I wanted to make sure that what I did here today was pleasant. So I wanted to get the bad news out of the way first. So she had this lady here called Tea with Jane Austen by Kim Wilson, one of my favorite authors. And she has a chapter called Tea on Horseback. And since I've been doing stealth sipping, I'm always interested in some different location for taking a sip. And Tea on Horseback, if you'll remember, those of you who are really involved with, really familiar with Wives and Daughters, the series by Elizabeth Gaskell, noticed that Lady Harriet had taken Molly under her wing and taken her in her carriage and introduced her to some of the merchants and some of the other people, and also had given her card to people, and I guess it was to show that she approved of Molly. So she had her with her in her carriage, and there were several stops she made where people brought things to her on a tray and set it on a tray that extended from this carriage. And I don't know if you remember that scene or not. Oh, I thought that was so neat. It's like a drive-in, you know, the old-fashioned drive-in where they'd put a tray on the edge of your window, A&W, whatever. So I got this place in her book called Tea on Horseback. Tea, at first a luxury only for the rich, then later almost a necessity of life for the average British citizen, was an irresistible target for taxes. The ruinously heavy taxes, sometimes over 100%, kept legally purchased tea out of the reach of the poor and gave a huge boost to the already wildly popular business of smuggling. In Jane Austen's time, tea in England sold for 6 shillings or so a pound for the very cheapest sorts, up to 20 shillings a pound or more for the finest, more than double a week's wage for an unskilled worker. In contrast, one could buy tea in Holland for a fraction of the cost. Smugglers knew a good thing when they saw it, and quickly added tea to their other profitable cargoes of brandy, tobacco, perfume, silks, and lace. If caught, free traders, as they preferred to be called, faced transportation to the colonies, or even hanging, yet smuggling was so widespread it could have been counted as one of Great Britain's major industries. Now, I'll have to remind you that transportation began in the American colonies first. And then when America got its independence, or as it was getting its independence, transportation also was increasing to Australia. So a lot of people forget that the Americas were penal colonies as well. It's not. It's just almost completely left out of our official historical narrative. In some areas near the coast, so many men were involved in free trading that it was hard to find workers for the farms. Look how they changed a word or a phrase to make it appear to be okay. Free trading. Well, who wouldn't want someone to be free to trade? Well, and really behind it was something quite bad. In some areas near the coast, so many men were involved in free trading that it was hard to find workers for the farms. Smuggling gave goods to a certain cachet, lifting ordinary merchandise out of the mundane and into the realm of forbidden fruit. Ladies were delighted to show off their contraband silks, laces, perfumes, and gentlemen bragged about their smuggled French brandy. Richard Twining estimated that at least half the tea drunk in England was smuggled. Almost everyone, it seemed, even clergymen, bought smuggled tea why then did some families choose to buy more expensive legally imported tea? The answers are easy: for the taste and the quality. To keep seawater out of it on the crossing to England, smuggled tea was packed in large oilskin bags, which gave an off taste. Yeah. On landing, the tea was usually repacked in sacks, which were then slung over horses for the trip inland. Add horse sweat to the lingering flavor of oilskin, and you get an idea why many people preferred the taste of legal tea. The quality of the tea sold in England in Jane Austen's day was variable, to put it mildly. The best legal tea was usually pure, although the Chinese sometimes dyed green tea for export, and was available in many different grades and prices. Good smuggled tea could be bought for less money, if you didn't mind that odd "do I smell like a horse" taste. But lower even that smuggled tea lurked a nasty grade of tea, and sometimes it was dangerous. Sometimes it wasn't even real tea at all. Housemaids could earn a nice income, sometimes £1 a pound, by drying their employees' soggy, wet, used tea leaves and selling them out the back door to unscrupulous dealers. The leaves were dyed to look new and resold to unwary buyers. I suppose some life may have been left in the re-dried tea leaves, but they can't have provided a stimulating tea experience. Quality went downhill from there. Quantities of real tea, new or used, might be stretched with the addition of other leaves, twigs, and sometimes floor sweepings. Now remember, I read out of Brian Kozlowski's book, The Jane Austen Diet, where he talked about all the things they added to bread in those days to make it light and fluffy, chalk and different things. So to show that it began back there, all these additives. Even worse, an illegal industry sprang up to manufacture a type of bogus tea called smouch, which never saw China in its life. According to Richard Twining, who led the fight against the adulteration of tea, the fake tea was made with ash tree leaves that were dried, baked, trod upon until the leaves were small, then lifted and steeped in copperas in sheep's dung, after which, being dried on the floor, they are fit for use. It is worth noting that, sheep's dung aside, the dyes used in adulterated tea were often poisonous. Copperas is another name for green vitriol, a toxic substance used at the time to make a black dye and ink, to tan leather, and to manufacture gunpowder, among its other uses. Not exactly what the Austens wanted to drink with their tea. Jane Austen wrote to Cassandra in 1814 from London. I am sorry to hear that there has been a rise in tea. I do not mean to pay Twinings till later in the day, when we may order a fresh supply. If Jane went in person to fulfill that errand at Twining's tea warehouse, she would have walked through a doorway that looked virtually the same as it does today. The tall doors of 216 The Strand were flanked by classical pillars and topped by an archway with a golden lion and two large realistically painted Chinese figures, which reminded tea drinkers that where their tea had come from. Once inside, she would have been greeted with the aromatic scent of many different sorts of tea. Like many customers of the time, she would probably have smelled the tea to judge its fragrance and character before she bought it. All tea in those days was bought in bulk and weighed out on apothecaries' scales for the purchaser. Prepackaged tea wasn't produced until 1826, and the tea bag wasn't even dreamt of until the 20th century. Tea could be bought by the ounce or by the pound, or even by the chest. Jane would have been able to choose from among a dozen or more varieties of tea: black teas, Souchong, Pekoe, medium teas such as Imperial and Bing, and green teas such as Hyson and Gunpowder, to name a few. Period mentions of tea often called it bohea, meaning black tea, or Hyson, meaning green, but in her works Jane Austen only refers to tea alone and green tea. It is therefore probable that for her tea meant black tea. Twinings has no record of the kind of or amount of tea to the Austens ordered from them, but in Jane's letters she once refers to China tea, perhaps a type of black tea. The Austens likely bought several pounds at a time to last until the next opportunity to order from London. Now, I won't read any more, but I will explain that green tea and black tea are the same, only not oxidized as long. And so I want to make sure that I get to read a little bit more from the Jane Austen diet, and he uses the health as a whole, a lifestyle as a whole, not just the food you eat or a diet you go on, but the time you spend in quietness. And he had written of this in one of the chapters, and I wanted to read it to you. An interval of meditation. Now, meditation's mentioned in the Psalms, where David said he would meditate and on his bed day and night, and meditate day and night. And it just means a mulling over something or a thinking of something, so that you can kind of go off the mental grid and into getting your thoughts sorted out and figuring things out, just being quiet. So, an interval of meditation. Sometimes Austen heroines have to go off the mental grid to process those shocking articles of news that seem to pummel them daily. And he mentions, her sister and all the drama that was created by people in her realm in those days. Well, today, of course, we've got a constant barrage of not just family upheavals and family news, but then we have to deal with the politics constantly that go on and are broadcast to us all the time. You can't run away from it. And even if you tried to go and live in a cabin in the woods, somebody would probably come out and tell you something. So what was their remedy for it? And it was the characters throughout the Austen world calm back down with the Regency version of meditation. So let's see what that is. It's not really a bad word. Emma, Anne, Eleanor, and Lizzie all practice it, frequently needing mental take fives, quick retreats to somewhere quiet where their brains can ask a few therapeutic questions like, what just happened? And how am I going to respond? This is good, to take yourself away, excuse yourself. In the olden days, ladies would just excuse themselves and go to their bedroom or off into the kitchen by themselves and just kind of think about what they had just heard, what was just been told, or what someone just said to them, and how they were going to respond, or maybe to help them keep quiet and not blurt out something, especially if you've just been insulted. To get up and say, excuse me for a minute, and walk away might help you get a hold of yourself before you make history that they will never let you forget by something that you spurted out in retaliation. So that's what I call it. It's just a quick take five. Our mothers used to go and to wherever it was that they combed their hair, and just kind of comb their hair a little bit and freshen up and feel a little bit better. An interval of meditation was the best corrective. A few minutes of quiet solitude. And so it says, surely these meditations might look a bit amateurish for those of us to accompanied to viewing meditation as a complicated, cross-legged combo of heavy breathing, brass bells, and deep chants. But the Austen never knew meditation in those types of terms. For her, the real meditation lay in simply experiencing the power of delightful quiet. Silence, stillness, and quiet. Most of us don't fully experience it today until we're fast asleep, but Austen knew that being cognitively silent from time to time was essential to a healthy mind. The quietness of it does me good, she wrote her sister in 1813, describing her enjoyment of a few moments of snug solitude with the front drawing room all to myself. I would like to read more of that to you later, but I wanted to just discuss it a little bit on how we all, choose a way of eating, or maybe you have an allergy or something, and so you're reading all the ingredients carefully, and just be careful whatever you put in your mouth. Let's also be careful what we put in our minds. Let's also be careful of getting the right amount of rest and not taxing our mental capacities so much with jittery news and maybe even jittery friendships where you might have people around you who you can't really trust not to blow up at you. And let's go on a diet from some of these other things too that cause mental turmoil. And because, like he said in this book, the diet is not all about food. It's all about it's about rest. It's about the proper balance of social life and quietness. It's about fresh air. It's about water and bathing and other things that make life more balanced and complete. He mentions many different aspects of it here, and about the ingredients in food, but also the idea of nature, and the mind-body connection was his best chapter. It was at the end of his book. If you want to get that and read it, it's absolutely fantastic. And I have read it in a previous video, but I can't tell you which one it was because I didn't categorize it like I should. So I wanted to end it by reading from Stepping Heavenward, Mrs. E. Prentice, because this was about the 15-year-old girl that becomes 16 during the diary, and I'm going to soon identify as a 16-year-old. So she says how dreadfully old I am getting, 16, and she describes a session she had with her mother, where her mother told her to be careful about being conceited or something like that. So she's recording how this happened, and she said, "Conceit, oh mother, if you only knew how horrid I already think I am." Mother smiled a little. Then, and this is a story, this is a diary of the relationship of a girl with her mother, and all of us have always felt, I'm sure you of a certain age, or a vital age, can remember feeling like you wanted to do everything right for your mother, and sometimes failing and being corrected hurt more than making the mistake. Mother smiled a little. Then she went on with her list till she made out me to be the worst creature in the world. I burst out crying and was running off to my room, but she made me come back and hear the rest. She said my character would be essentially formed by the time I'd reached my 20th year, and left it to me to say if I wished to be, as a woman, what I was now as a girl. That's a very good point. I felt sulky and would not answer. I was shocked to think I had only got 4 more years in which to improve. Does that sound like Emma? What's the good of being nearly 20 if there's so much more to learn? But see, Emma's mistake was, and Jane Austen tried to bring this out, was in trying to improve herself, she was using other people to test her skills and to perfect herself, perfect her matchmaking skills, perfect her hospitality skills, perfect her sewing skills and all. She just was always imposing on other people to, quote, help them. She was one of these we called them do-gooders in the old days, and we were always trying to run away from do-gooders, people who wanted to help you when you didn't want help. So that was her mistake. Always try to improve yourself. You know what the Bible says, take the log out of your own eye before trying to take the speck out of your brother's eye. And so, as I said when I started this broadcast, all of the embroglios that I've gotten myself into have been when I have stepped out of my own realm and tried to get away from my work and my business, or someone else has imposed on me their business, their work. So just take care of yourself. And if you're home alone now, maybe your children are gone, or maybe you feel you're alone even though you have a family, or maybe you don't have children, work on, and no one wants your help. Let's say you get into a church or something and everything's all sewed up. All the things that can be done for others is just all taken care of by other people. Then what you need to do then is just go home and take care of yourself and put yourself on a plan of things to learn and do that will improve yourself. That's the best way to teach anyway, and you can stay out of a lot of conflict with people. Mother went on to say that I had in me the elements of a fine character if I would only conquer some of my faults. You are frank and truthful, she said, and in some things conscientious. And she said, and it is my daily prayer that you may become a lovely, loving, useful woman. I made no answer. I wanted to say something, but my tongue wouldn't move. I was angry with myself. At last everything came out in a rush, mixed up with such a flood of tears that I thought my mother's heart would melt. And so she goes on to talk about wanting to correct her faults. Very good. So we're going to continue this next time, and I'm trying hard to read things that are relevant to you, and I hope you have a wonderful day and that you got a few things done. These are designed to do the repetitive, tedious work at home that besieges all of us. Sometimes you need a little company or something to listen to. I've been listening to audiobooks. I will leave the link to this lady's audiobooks. I don't know if you would find it interesting or not. And I'll also leave a link to some of the poses that I have found that help my posture. And I was born into a family who have a lineage of dowager's hump. And it's not the same as osteoporosis. You can have dowager's hump and never break a bone. Your bones aren't brittle. And dowager's hump. And of course, I didn't know it until, just a few years ago. I didn't realize it, that it was hereditary and dowager's hump. And then I had to tell my children they have that gene, dowager's hump. But of course, as we go along further along in our descendantry, there's less likely that we would have dowager's hump. But I noticed that I do tend to slouch. So I've been finding these wonderful exercises and poses, and they're not really exercises, but they're just poses. And I wanted to include that, a link to that, if you want to have a look at it. It's too bad they call it by some kind of Eastern name or anything, but some of them are just common exercises and good sense to all of us. So ladies, I hope that you will filter out the stuff that you're not interested here and just listen to what you think goes along with your way of life and will work for you. And until I hope to see you really soon, and I'll see you again, and stay close to Christ. Goodbye.